I'm Pam McGaffin, and this is the story behind my story.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Pam McGaffin.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Author Stories. I am your host, Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show at hankgarner.com. And while you're there, please click on the subscribe links over in the right-hand sidebar. You can subscribe on your Android phone, your iPhone. It's Stitcher Radio. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find Author Stories. We're also on YouTube. There's a link over in the right-hand sidebar as well. And you can subscribe there and never miss an episode. Today's episode is sponsored by the AIPP, the Association of Independent Publishing Professionals. If you are an indie author and you need to build a support team to help you format your book, edit your book, get a cover designed for your book, anything that an indie author needs to get their book out there, the AIPP has a member that can help you make your book, your product, the very best it can be. If you look in the show notes at the bottom of this episode, you'll find a link to the AIPP, or go to aipponline.org/members and browse through the member library and find the professional to fill out your team. Like I said, anything that you need to make your indie publishing journey a success, there's a member there to help. It's a very simple website, very easy to navigate through. Go check out aipponline.org/members today and fill out your indie author team. At the end of the show, be sure to stick around for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Thanks for listening. Essence, Book 1, Septima, the first volume in the exciting new science fiction series by Nick Breaker. Troy is no longer himself. Kidnapped by aliens infected with the essence of the dead General Tomas, Troy grasps at his only hope of survival. He merges his soul with the alien parasite trying to possess him, leaving him forever changed, and not entirely for the worse. Once plagued by crippling phobias, Troy is now fearless, willing to fight his enemies with his bare hands. But with his new strength also comes a new weakness: women. Tomas was notorious for his insatiable desires, and Troy finds himself constantly resisting temptation, especially the gorgeous, manipulative Alta. Although Alta has convinced the Pyrans she's helping them prepare to battle the murderous Reptarans, she's actually meticulously planning to steal their ultimate power source and then abandon them to their fate. Alta won't hesitate to kill anyone in her way, and her deep love for Tomas is Troy's only advantage. He convinces Alta that Tomas has taken full control of his being and thus keeps her trust and his life. While Alta schemes, Troy covertly struggles to save the Pyrans and prevent the Reptarans from invading Earth. But first he must wrest back control of his own soul. Essence, Book 1, Septima, the first volume in the exciting new science fiction series by Nick Breaker. Find it on Amazon today. There's a link in the show notes. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Pam McGaffin on the show with me today. Pam has a fantastic new book called The Leaving Year, and it's, Pam, I think it's described as YA, and I guess that I guess when I was reading the book, I didn't like genre or age designation didn't really strike me, which is a great thing, because I think this book has very broad appeal. So anyway, welcome to the show, Pam.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to have you. We start each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Yes, I can't remember how old I was, but I was young, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and it was one of those rare summer nights. The sky was almost glowing blue, and you could see the stars. I was out in my backyard of my house where I lived with my mother and my grandmother, and I just remember becoming overcome with the wonder of it all. And I just ran into the house, grabbed my grandmother's notebook pad that she used to make grocery lists on, and I just filled page after page with a story about a girl who could fly. It wasn't a very good story. It ended with her waking up, the ultimate in lazy endings. But I knew at that moment that this is what I wanted to do.
Were you a big reader as a kid?
You know, I want to say I was, but I really wasn't. I'm actually a much bigger reader now. At the same time, there were books that I remember just blowing me away, that really, really stuck with me. One is Scott Odell, Island of the Blue Dolphins. I remember reading that in middle school and just being left with this like book hangover, this ache where I like, what do I do now? But I think the character's resourcefulness in that book, she's basically left alone on an island to fend for herself, and it's based on a true story. When I read she made her house out of whale bones, I was hooked.
Right.
So, yeah, just specific books just really sunk in, and but a big reader, I wouldn't say I was devouring everything. I guess I associated reading sometimes with being alone in the summer and not going to camp because my mother didn't drive.
Well, I think the answer that everyone expects is yes. I devoured everything I got my hands on, but I was a little bit like you. I have struggled with dyslexia, and it was just not fun. It was not something I enjoyed doing until I found some books that just really pulled me in, and kind of like you, and I knew people that would read the labels on hairspray bottles if they didn't have anything else to read. But to me, I think it was more about story than just the act of reading. I love stories, and I eventually got around to loving reading, but it was I took a little different path too. I think we're all different that way.
Absolutely.
So you spent a good bit of your career as a journalist, and in that field, what got you interested in journalism?
Oh, well, I was in high school, and I signed up for a journalism class, and that led to writing for the school newspaper, and I immediately became enamored of seeing my name in print. That was the first hook. And it was instant gratification. I could go out, interview somebody. Again, the story. I was gathering stories, basically, and writing, and then getting it in print immediately, instant publication. And it was heady. I was, for a teenager, that was like a big thing to see your name in black and white. After high school, I actually worked for a community newspaper before I started college. And I actually managed to publish articles in this community newspaper. Here I was, like, barely out of high school, and I Washington.
Wow. So this just the love of collecting stories got you into it. I have always been fascinated by journalism and how a lot of journalists eventually go on to write fiction. And to me, there's if you're a good journalist, you have figured out a way to tell a story that really happened. But a lot of times there will be multiple people covering the same story. But four different people will tell that story, report on the facts four different ways. I love that people put their own spin on things so that you can take just a list of facts but make it engaging. When you went on to write fiction, do you feel like your time in journalism helped your fiction writing?
Oh, absolutely, beyond a doubt. For one, it gave me an ear to how people really talk, because I was constantly capturing quotes. I had an ear for what would make a good quote and write it down. Also, story. I'm gathering stories, and I knew what made a good story, journalism-wise. You're, looking for something obviously with conflict. Happy, bright stories don't make news. So you're looking for conflict, you're looking for mystery, you're looking for something that people can relate to, you're looking for a local angle, and newsworthiness, which you could define in a number of ways. But absolutely, it helped me. Also helped me just develop that writing muscle, the habit of writing and writing fast and writing on deadline. Now, I will say that when I'm writing fiction, I am not fast. I am the slowest writer in the universe. But it did develop the muscle, and at least I can write fast if I absolutely have to.
Right. Writing dialogue, I completely agree that just getting out and talking to people and watching how people react to situations and that can do so much for a writer's dialogue writing, because writers tend to be pretty solitary people, and you can tell a lot of times in someone's writing if they have just been sitting in their office and playing with imaginary characters for too long and haven't gotten out and talked to real people for a while because you have to talk to real people to get dialogue right.
Absolutely. I'm an eavesdropper. I will eavesdrop.
I think a lot of writers are.
Confession time. I will eavesdrop on, if we're sitting in a restaurant, I'll be listening to the conversation in the next booth, or, if I'm having a cup of coffee, I'm kind of listening to the person buying their coffee at the counter. And I'm a very nosy person, which is probably why I went into journalism. It's a license to be nosy if ever there was one. But you really have to keep an ear to the pulse of life and how people really speak to make it convincing. Because in fiction, dialogue is one of the, I guess I've heard it said that it's one of the hardest things to write, I think. And it's not exactly how people talk. I mean, you kind of have to have a shorthand version of it. Obviously you're not going to go on for pages with ums and ahs, and so it is a little bit stylized, but you also have to make it sound real.
Exactly.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah, and because people speak in broken sentences and grunts and uhs and ahs, like you said, and there's a real skill to interpreting that to, you're absolutely right. So how long did you spend in journalism?
Probably about, I'm going to say 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I really did start right out of high school, and then I went on to the University of Washington, worked for the UW Daily, and then from there worked for a community newspaper, and then graduated to a daily newspaper. I stayed there for probably about 13 years. That was the Everett Herald. I got to give a shout out to my old newspaper. And I learned so much. You learn so much about people being a journalist.
Right. So I hear that there's a story about a class reunion and something about a challenge, whether this was just a personal challenge to yourself. What happened at this class reunion that ultimately gave us this fantastic book, The Leaving Year?
Thank you. Well, it was my 30th reunion, so that would have been in 2008. I'm revealing how old I am.
Mine is coming up next year. That I just thought about that. Oh gosh, that makes my head hurt. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, I'm pushing 50 is a nice big round number, and I come to the realization that, oh my gosh, I'm not getting any younger here. And I still have not realized my life's dream, which I don't remember exactly when I thought I have to do this, but it was the reunion that triggered it. And I thought, I'm going to write a novel. I have the next 10 years until my next reunion to get it done, and I'm going to do it.
So you said that you were reminded of this lifelong dream. What was your, when did you, know when you were younger that you wanted to write fiction, and how did you, lose that? I think a lot of us have these dreams, and we say we're going to do something, and then you get busy living life and raising a family and paying bills and all that stuff, and you just so easily lose sight of it. When did you first know that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I think it goes back to that experience when I was younger, in the backyard and just discovering and create out of my head. I fell in love with that. And then, like so many people, I thought, well, I can't make a living doing that. I have to do something practical. And so I went into journalism, and I love journalism. I really enjoyed being a reporter, but I also always had this kind of lingering longing to write fiction. And in fact, when I was working as a reporter, I took a couple of classes at the University of Washington, night classes in fiction writing, and I actually wrote some short stories, and then, but then I kind of put them away. I tried to get the stories published and got a bunch of rejection slips and sort of put it in a drawer. And then it really was really, if I'm going to do it, I have to do it now, otherwise it's never going to happen. And I don't want to die with that regret of having done what I've always wanted to do.
Because the reality is, every year that goes by that you don't pursue that, it gets easier and easier to not pursue it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Life intervenes.
Yes, it does. And not in a beautiful John Lennon, kind of way. It just
no.
It just gets in the way. Right. So you're kind of spurred to pursue this dream again when you meet all of these people that are pretending to have fabulous lives at the reunion. Let's be honest about what happens at reunions, right? Yeah. So, did you have an idea for a book, or just the idea that you wanted an idea? Like when?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was it. It was literally an intention.
Right.
I will write a book. I didn't have some smoldering idea of what I wanted to write. I kind of stole myself away to. We have a family beach house on Guaymas Island, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with Washington State, but it's kind of a puddle jump from Anacortes, and it's a lovely place. The cabin looks out on the water, and I told my husband, give me a weekend. I want to get out there and see if the muse will come to me. And it did in a kind of unexpected way. I got up there only to miss the ferry. And so I had this about an hour to kill. I took my dog for a walk along and just sort of looked at these really lovingly restored Victorian homes and started imagining, well, what lives have those houses seen? What happened to the people in there? And that got me thinking of, a well-off family that experiences a reversal of fortune, and Anacortes being a fishing town. I thought, a fisherman father lost at sea, leaves a family behind, leaves a daughter. And then Ida's voice came to me. And it took many turns and twists from there, but that was the seed of the idea.
And Ida, that you mentioned, Ida Petrovich, this fantastic protagonist that leads us through this book, is a fascinating character. She's 15 years old when we first meet her, and she goes on this journey of discovery, self-discovery, and a familial discovery. When you said that you heard Ida's voice, I'm always fascinated by what comes first to a writer. Is it a character that speaks to them? Is it a setting? Is it maybe a plot device? And it seems like you kind of got all of those things at once with Ida, didn't you?
Yeah, I would say it probably started with the setting.
Okay.
This one specific house, and what's kind of eerie is I've gone back to look for that house and I can't seem to find it. It's really,
I love it.
Kind of spooky. But I
house.
Literally did. I did hear a voice. It was a sentence I ended up throwing out. It just served as a spark, and then it was gone. Writing, and it just happened very organically. I'm a pantser.
Yeah.
I don't outline. I basically let one scene suggest the next and keep going. I write chronologically. I can't seem to write out of order. That just boggles my brain that people can do that.
Me either. That is the to me that's the craziest thing in the world. Like, how do you follow the story if you? And I interviewed Diana Gabaldon a couple years ago, that the writer of the Outlander series, and she said that she writes completely out of order. Just when a scene comes to her, she writes it and then stitches it all together after the fact, and that just made my head hurt. I can't imagine.
Yeah, no, I can't do that, and it may be a byproduct of being a journalist. You basically tell things in the order they happen. It's ingrained. I can't get away from that. I start from the beginning, go to the end. That said, my process was horrendously inefficient. I probably rewrote my first paragraph. I don't know. I'm just going to guess here. 257 times. And I was still rewriting it in the way later drafts. And then finally I ended up with the first sentence and I knew it was right.
Yeah.
But it took me that long.
Well, and
it's like I couldn't rest until I had that good first paragraph.
But that first paragraph is so important. Folks say, well, give yourself permission to write a horrible first draft and then come back and edit. And I completely agree with that. I think if you self-edit too much, you'll never get to the end. But, I'm a bit of a pantser too. But I usually know the beginning and I usually know the end, kind of where I'm going to. But man, that beginning is so important. It lays the foundation for the whole thing, and it really sets the tone for the book. And if you can get that, if you can really get the spirit of the book in that first page, I think you're on to a great story.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it took for me. I did write the whole book with probably several different beginnings, but I really felt it click when I got that one that I knew was right.
You told us about how you discovered Ida and her situation, the family with the reversal of fortunes, and then her father being missing kind of comes in. And then this book takes a huge twist that I was not expecting. You first kind of you think, okay, I know what the story is going to be, and then you're like, nope, that's not what the story is. This is a completely different story, and you really take us on a journey that and the people that Ida meets and the mysteries that she uncovers and the reconciliations that with herself and what she thinks about things and family relationships. Just kind of talk us through the how this story unfolded for you as the writer.
Oh boy. Well, like I say, it was very organic. I basically let one scene suggest the next and one chapter suggest the next chapter. I always knew that I wanted to take her to Alaska, because that's where her father fished, and that's where he was presumed lost, is up in southeast Alaska. So I knew she had to go there, and I had to figure out a way to get her there. That was a little bit of a toughie, because her mother is very, very protective. Ida is the only child. And this is the late 60s, mind you, when we've got multiple assassinations and people are thinking the world is coming to an end. I mean, it really was a tumultuous time. And Christine, the mother, has just lost a husband. She's not about to lose a daughter, too. So she's keeping this girl in a tight grip. She's not about to let her go traipsing off to Alaska. So Ida just runs away. She just takes it upon herself, she's going to get some fake ID, jump on a ferry, and go up there and find out for herself, because she's not getting the answers she wants from her mother. So that's the twist I think you're talking about is the trip to Alaska, and she ends up. Her search for the answers takes a little bit of a detour, because she kind of follows a love interest up there, ends up working at a salmon cannery, and
a Filipino love interest.
What's that? Yes. A Filipino love interest. He's actually a classmate of hers. He's gone up to Alaska to work in a salmon cannery, which is apparently very common among young people coming of age in the Pacific Northwest. I never did work in a salmon cannery, but it seems like every other person I talk to, oh yeah, I did that. So, and it's a gruesome, horrible job. I mean, it's tiring. You work 15-hour days. There's a lot of blood and guts involved, and it stinks. And
hopefully they all belong to the fish.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I had so much fun describing how gross canning is.
Pam, the book is set in the late 60s, like you said, and at the end of the Summer of Love. Did setting the book in the 60s, do you think that helped to overcome some obstacles for Ida? If this book was set in 2018 and a kid wants to run off to Alaska, I would think there are many more hurdles now than there probably were then. There's no internet. There's, communication then is not what it is now. Do you think that not having to deal with modern technology and communications helped in telling the story?
Oh, yes. Yes. She would have been found instantly.
Right. There would have been Amber Alerts and yeah.
Exactly. There would have been like a GPS on her phone.
Right.
And that would be the end of the story, and that wouldn't be very interesting.
Yeah, the book would have been called The Leaving Afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of remember the 60s. I was probably about 10 years old. And I just think, well, it's an incredibly interesting time, first of all. And it also kind of fit with my theme of self-discovery. The whole country's going through an identity crisis during the late 60s. And I wanted to kind of infuse Ida's story with that backdrop. And also, there's the technology is obviously rustic compared to now. At one point she does call her mother from a payphone, and I describe it coming through the line like through candy wrappers crackling. And then the call is dropped. So yes, it did help that she couldn't be found right away.
Yeah. The book is like I said earlier, when you think it's one thing and then it's something else. This had to be a lot of fun to write. I know you worked on it for quite a while, but did you always feel close to Ida when you were writing this? Did it always feel alive to you, or did you have periods where you had to put it away for a while and come back to it?
I, like every writer, experienced or neophyte, had horrible periods of self-doubt where I wondered, what the heck am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm delusional to think I can do this. And I really believe it was Ida who pulled me through that. I bonded to her. I got to know her. I got to know her and the other major characters, Sam and her cousin Dina, and Christine, her mother. And I felt almost like I owed it to them to bring their story to light.
Now, you see, Pam, to some audiences that would sound very strange, that you become attached to make-believe people. But I promise you, to the audience of this podcast, people are nodding their heads like, yes, I totally. That is a common theme here. But
they live in your head.
They do.
They do.
And you talk to the voices, and no one comes to pick you up. And it's that's the difference between writers and other folks. Writers are this strange breed of people that when you are working on something and you're completely frustrated, or maybe it's no good, or maybe you stack up rejections, and instead of giving up, writers say, well, I'll just go back and rewrite it. I'll keep revising it until it is good. Or, I'll write a second novel. People didn't like the first one. I'll spend 5 years and write another one. And they just keep doing it. And, what kept you pushing forward? Was it that commitment that you made to yourself at the reunion, or was it deeper than that? Was it reconnecting with this lifelong desire that you had to tell stories?
Wow. I think it was, a little bit of both. I really, really had set the intention to write a book, and I was determined to do it. Also, my husband was footing the bill. I mean, he was basically keeping this family afloat while I was doing my creative thing, and I felt I owed it to him. And so, I mean, I just had to do it. I had to finish it no matter how painful, no matter how long. And I just kept plugging along and plugging along. And at times I thought I would never finish, but eventually you do finish. I mean, you just put enough words together, you do get to the end. You got to keep that faith going. And yeah, it's painful, but eventually it becomes less painful. And you can get it done. I that's a message I really want to get out there is, if you ever wanted to do something in your life that you've been burning to do, find a way to make it happen and just do it. Yeah.
Well, and you did it, Pam. This book is phenomenal. It's really a fantastic book. And I meant that when I said that earlier. It's I know on Amazon it's kind of I think it's in YA, teen and young adult. But it's more than that to me. Like the first couple of pages, maybe I'm thinking about Ida and her age and her situation, but all of that kind of dissolves, and you just really fall into the story. And I really do think that this book will have super wide appeal. But the book is called The Leaving Year. Pam, thank you for writing this book, and thank you for taking time to come on the show today.
Well, thank you, Hank, for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
If people are just learning about you and your work, where can they find you online to connect and maybe follow along with your career going forward?
Yeah, that would be on my website, which is down right now, but I'm trying to get that fixed. It is Pam J, as in Jane, McGaffin, McGaffin.com. And that has my links on there and a blog and how to buy my book. And
nice.
That would be Pam Central right there once I get it back up.
And we'll be sure to link your Amazon page as well, where everyone can buy the book and all of that good stuff. Pam, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you, Hank. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
I was walking through the woods between Wolfert's Roost and the future site of my father's Stone Manor house. The house would eventually stand on what had been old Baltus's pumpkin field, the land where I had found my grandfather's head. Father had chosen the spot for its view of the Hudson River. Knoll was to be a grand mansion in the Gothic Revival style, but at the time the mansion was but a few foundations of Van Brunt stone. I had become fond of the place already, the idea of it, and I spent many a night alone in a shack on the property. My mother disapproved. She would have me sleep in the room across from hers in our townhouse. But I was 15 and did not answer to her. I kept a bottle of spirits hidden in the crook of 2 walnut trees near old Baltus's grave. I thought he would approve of the gesture. I had stopped along my way to fetch it out. At the moment the first pull of liquor touched my throat, I heard a ghastly, inhuman laugh. I was not alone in the woods. Had God sent the horseman after me? Had I sinned that terribly? I ran through the wood and found the field where Knoll was to be built. The outline of the foundations was barely discernible beneath the snow. An apparition stood there. Though I have seen him many times since, I shall never forget my first glimpse. Gaunt in moonlight, headless, exuding power and malice. A magic thing in the land of the ordinary. The headless horseman of Sleepy Hollow. What chills those words evoke! It charged at me, hatchet raised. I stood transfixed, unable to move, unable to even imagine escape. This was the servant of God, after all, sent to strike down sinners. I hurled the bottle from my hand, ashamed that I had become a drunkard as Baltus had been. It shattered against the foundations of Knoll. I stretched out my arms and awaited judgment, A piercing white light broke the darkness. The horse reared. "Not my Dylan!" cried Agatha, appearing from the wood. She held a skull in her hand. It shone brightly as a diamond. And in that moment I understood. The horseman did not serve God. He served my grandmother. Perhaps in that moment I came to see Agatha and God as one and the same. The unholy spirit fought her command. A foreleg of the demon horse struck my head with such power that I fell backwards with a cry and knew no more. I carry the scar to this day. A slight indentation in my temple, barely noticeable. In my days of courting, I was told that when I am angry, the patch of insulted skull bone will stand out in a disturbing manner. I have never had occasion to see this phenomenon, however, as I am generally well pleased whenever I pass a mirror.